Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I have written, it's a privilege to be here, but I've almost been pinned with a tail, so maybe it's less of a privilege today than usual. But it is a joy to be continuing our sermon series today, our series of sermons on a sermon. We're looking each week through the Sermon on the Mount. And today we are looking, I get to kind of introduce the gear change in Jesus' sermon. We've really been focusing so far on our inner spiritual lives, our right relationship with God, the attitudes of our hearts, our postures towards Jesus. And it's been really challenging. That might just be me, but I think this is a really challenging piece of scripture. The values that Jesus has been sharing with us, they're not kind of tweaks and adjustments to our thinking. These are complete overhauls of our attitudes, of our hearts, of our minds. They're not kind of little side steps. These are big seismic shifts. And that is scary and that is overwhelming, but that is a really good thing. This should challenge us. When I've been preparing, it's really struck me that the heart of the Christian truth, the message that we believe, is a people that have become separated from God. And if God is calling us back into his way of doing things, we shouldn't be surprised that what we've been talking about over the last few weeks and what we're going to talk about today feels otherworldly. This is a manifesto for a different kingdom. So we should be prepared to be challenged. And we should bear that in mind as we pivot today from looking at our inner spiritual lives to our relationships with others. This manifesto Jesus has written for right relationship with God and right relationship with others. So by the time I'm finished, I suspect we'll just be a kind of church family of bliss, and we'll all just spend the rest of our lives completely entwined in one another's hearts and minds, and it will all be beautiful. Let's see what Jesus says. I hope if I turned it on. Do not judge, for you too will be judged. In the same way you judge others, you will be judged. With the measure you use, it will be measured to you. I've gone the wrong way. How and why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take that speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in yours? You hypocrite. I tell you, that is difficult to read when you're preparing for a sermon, and every time you go back to the passage. You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the plank from your brother's. Do not give to dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. If you want to get your Bibles open, if you've got them with you, if you've got a Bible on your phone, we're looking at Matthew 7, 1-6. And we're going to look through the passage, but if you've got a physical Bible, this is where it's really helpful to be able to see the whole Sermon on the Mount together and see where it slots in. We could spend all day here, which I won't do, doing a really dense analysis of every single word. Why has Jesus chosen planks and specks? What is the Jewish understanding of pearls and pigs and dogs? But as I've been preparing and thinking about what the message for us this morning is, the thing that's really struck me is preparing ourselves for our relationships, getting ourselves into the place from which we conduct them, rather in the intricacies of how we approach, how we conduct our relationships, setting ourselves up to succeed. Jesus is teaching in a very specific order in the Sermon on the Mount. He wants to give us the understanding we need so that then we can be transformed, and then those things apply to the next section and the next section and the next. I don't want you to see the Sermon on the Mount as a to-do list. I want you to see it as an invitation to dig back into what Jesus has already taught us and see how it transforms our lives. I was brought up in the Church of England. Kieran's already made this joke this series. I was brought up in the Church of England, so we're going to do it in 3 points. But I work in the public sector, so they're not points, they're challenges. Challenge 1, challenge your opinion. The particular piece of the public sector I work in is healthcare. I stepped out of the lift in the hospital the other day to see one of these in the middle of the landing. It's the light's shining on it. This is an NHS issue bedside cabinet with lockable drawers and lots of places to lose your possessions in. But it didn't look as shiny as this one. It looked a little bit more like this. and someone had written an A4 piece of paper with a whiteboard marker in big letters, condemned. And because I'm hilarious, as I stepped out the lift, I said to my colleagues, I wonder what that cabinet did to deserve that. And they all thought it was hilarious. But this has actually stayed with me in quite a serious way. What sort of power and authority do you have to be able to condemn something, to be able to say this piece of taxpayer-funded equipment is no good for anything other than being stuck in a corridor and then awaiting a sort of non-urgent transportation to a skip? There is no point in attempting repair. There is no hope. There is nothing else that we can try. I think it can be quite difficult to get our heads around what judgment means. Why is Jesus telling us, do not judge? Does that mean the strictly come-dancing judges are all resigned to the fiery pits of hell? But the word that Matthew has recorded when he's written down Jesus' sermon, that we translate to judge, is krino. And this word isn't about a strictly come-dancing judgment or choosing which of the many available bedside cabinets you're going to choose to furnish your hospital. Those words about judgment in this context, in this word, have an element of issuing a decree. There's a value judgment. There's something in the word krino about weighing up a person and making a declaration about their character or their righteousness, and then following through with issuing a condemnation, issuing a result, resigning them for non-urgent transfer to a skip. Later in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is going to use a different word for judgment. He's going to say, judge others by the fruit of their lives, but that word is different. That word is about recognizing or identifying, seeing in someone the fruit of their lives. It is not about making a statement about someone's worth or value or final destination. If you were to krino someone, you might be saying they are beyond the pale. They are without hope. And so at the start of this shift in the Sermon on the Mount, where we are looking from our relationships with God to our relationships with other people, Jesus is starting by saying, you are not playing God. You are not the person to issue a krino judgment. God sees none of us as beyond hope or beyond the pale or without an opportunity for redemption. And so you should not see each other that way either. I'm sure you can all think of someone, political or otherwise, who actually that is the opinion that you have formed. That is the way you see them. And it is incredibly difficult for us to have a picture of some people and the things that they have done throughout human history any other way. But Jesus is saying, take this further and consider your own lives, the communities you live in. Where are we segregating or categorizing or grouping one another? Are there people in your lives that somehow you consider lower or lesser or just a little bit worse? People in the office that just cause problems every single week. Someone in the family that does not pull their weight. A different church that maybe doesn't do as much for the community as we think they should do. Are we starting to raise ourselves up in our minds by suppressing others? And sometimes we do it just to make ourselves feel a bit better. Do you know, at least I'm not like them, or I cannot be as bad as so-and-so, or never would I have stooped that low. I couldn't possibly have imagined it. Jesus' words are very clear about those intentions within us. Do not judge. And when Jesus says do not judge, he starts to talk about you being judged in the same way, measure for measure. And I think this is where things get really interesting. Can you hear some echoes of what we have already looked at in our sermon series? Measure for measure, an eye for an eye. Jesus, I think, is reflecting back to us a reminder of what he has already spoken about. He has told us in the sermon that he is going to fulfill the law and ultimately pay our biggest measure for us, but we need to accept that invitation and be invited into his way of doing things. Are we going to continue living in a worldly way where the measure that we measure with will be owed back to us? Or are we going to take that seismic shift into a God way? Are we going to accept the Jesus manifesto? And when we wind further, even back in the sermon, we see that right from the outset, Jesus has flipped the rules. I think Jesus is reminding us of how we use our power over others, whether it's political power or social power or financial power. The opening words in the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, it is the meek, it is the merciful, it is those who hunger and thirst for righteousness who are blessed. So when we come into our relationships, we've got to remember the position that Jesus wants us to take. And that's why I wanted you to have your Bibles open to the Sermon on the Mount, to see that Jesus has put this teaching in this place for a reason. One of the books that I've read in thinking about this is called The Narrow Path by a pastor called Richard Volodis. And he reminds us, I think he phrases this really nicely, meekness isn't weakness. Meekness is power under control. Blessed are the meek. Do not judge. Control the power that you have so that you are not wielding it over others, that you are not considering a hierarchy of people in your head. So if that sounds a bit daunting and impossible, you're in good company, because in doing this I have had some self-assessment and realised, without even meaning to, how much I have categorised the people around me and how much those assessments are made before I've even had time to consciously think. Which brings us to step 2, which is to challenge your vision. Why are we so sort of programmed, so ready to judge? Why is this our kind of default position? Well, Jesus says it's in our vision, it's in the way we are seeing. Or rather, our lack of the way we are seeing. All of the time, there is a plank in your eye. I don't know if my clip is going to work. I know there was some background business going on. I don't need the sound. If it works, great, you can see it in the background. This is a kind of a YouTube clip of an experiment I learned about at medical school that blew my mind. So you need to be 19-year-old Ailsa in a big lecture theatre learning about this. This experiment involves wearing upside-down glasses. You put on a pair of glasses that use mirrors to completely invert the world. So up is up, no, up is down and down is up, I think. And you wear them for a whole week. You do not take them off to sleep or shower or cook or anything. And obviously, this is an absolute disaster. You can't do anything because your brain is so programmed to understand things the right way round. But what is amazing is that if the subject wearing the glasses very quickly starts to recalibrate. So the video shows her doing some simple everyday tasks, which is obviously just impossible. But in a matter of days, she starts to be able to function normally. She starts to be able to get on with life. Later in the clip, they show her trying to write her own name. And first, she tries to write it the right way up for her. So we, as the observer, should see it upside down. And she can't do it, because in those few days, her brain has already taught her to write the right way up so that she can get on with her life. She's still trying to make her cup of tea. By the end of a week of doing this particular subject can ride a bike with the glasses on. So even though left is right and right is left and up is down and she doesn't really know where she is, her body has rewired her reflexes so she can just ride normally. I was hoping you'd all be like, wow, and I'd have to kind of calm you down, because I think it gets even cooler, which is when you take the glasses off, you can't adjust. This change is deep-seated. So if she takes the glasses off and tries to ride a bike, she can't do it anymore. Brain has rewired and re-understood the world according to this way of doing it. There we go. We could sit here for ages and watch her try and say Susanna, but Susanna's not here, so. Jesus uses the idea of our eyes throughout the Sermon on the Mount. It's a running theme. He connects it to light. He connects it to the lamp of the body. He connects it to the light of the world. And the order, again, is important because Jesus introduces the concept of our eyes, and then the next thing he talks about is contempt and lust and untruthfulness in oaths and an eye for an eye. And now we come to think about our relationship. This idea carries on. We saw earlier about being blindfolded, and I think it's very easy for us to kind of consider the blindfold and the plank as this hierarchy of sin. How can you tell that person off for their little white lie when you're telling this massive whopper of a lie every Sunday? But I think it's about a bit more than that. I think Jesus is saying, what are you blinded by? What is the plank in your eye? Because if you are viewing everyone or a particular person or a group with contempt, then you will not see them clearly. If lust is fueling your vision and your attitudes, then you will not properly see what is around you. Ever since that moment that sin entered the world, we have been wearing our upside-down glasses. We have been seeing things the wrong way, and we are so used to it that we've learned just to get on with our lives like that. And taking off those glasses is actually quite disconcerting. We can't ride up because everything is wrong. It feels upside down. Jesus is saying it's the right way up, but you need to learn to adjust. You need to set aside your sin, set aside those things that blur your vision, and then you will see clearly. Have you ever been in a situation where the anger that you harbor against someone for a mistake that they have made have stopped you seeing that the reason they made the mistake was a hurt that they've experienced before? Have you lusted after something, maybe a new car, and forgotten how good the one that you're sitting in is? Are your eyes clouded? Is there a plank in your vision by the way that you have learnt to see the world through the sin and desperateness that has come in? And when our eyes are clear, we see each other differently, and they see Jesus differently because the light, the lamp of the body, the light of Christ shines out. And when the time is right, and if we are both willing, and if the relationship is strong enough, and when the Lord ordains, then we can help each other to remove those specks. And that leads us on to the third challenge I have for us today, which is to challenge your intentions. The Africa Bible Commentary is one that my father-in-law recommends, and I have found this lovely little story in it while I was reading about this passage, so we're going to have a little story time. There was once a very dangerous leopard living in a very tall tree. No one had been able to lure it down to capture it. One day, a man brought a dog and a goat to the bottom of the tree. He tells the dog, "You can eat as much grass as you like," and he gives the goat a bowl of nshima, which in the Bembam community where this folktale is told, nshima is a human food that dogs also quite like. But he gives it to the goat. The man persists, tells them to eat their food, and the animals start to get a bit hungry and restless. There's a leopard watching in the tree, that dangerous leopard that the village has not been able to get rid of. He calls down, "Swap the food over. Your animals are getting hungry. The goat should be eating the grass and the dog should be eating that delicious bowl of food." But the man doesn't listen, and he keeps telling his animals to eat up, and the animals are getting hungry and restless, and eventually the leopard gets so frustrated with the situation that he jumps down from the tree and swaps the food over. The man whips out a net and catches the leopard. How many times have we got ourselves into situations that don't concern us out of frustration, or a need to show that we have the right answer, or a need to look like we know better, or a need just to be involved? How many of your relationships have an intention within them, even if it's crept in over time, an intention that isn't based in love, that isn't based in compassion, but is something for your own gain or your own glory? Has that ever left you getting trapped in a net? And again, when we take this passage, this next bit of do not judge, when we take it in isolation, there is a lot for us to learn. There's a simple message which doesn't quite make sense in our time and our culture, but we can understand. Pigs find pearls completely uninteresting, unnourishing, useless, unvaluable. So nice as they are, if you keep trying to feed your pig a pearl, your pig's going to get hungry and you're going to get frustrated. But again, this morning, I want us to view this passage as part of the whole sermon, because there's something else to say. We need to consider not only what we're doing in our relationships, but why we are doing it, the intentions, the standing point from which we face each other. The leopard did not intend to help the man. He wasn't acting from a place of love for the goat or the dog. He was there to flaunt his knowledge or belittle the man. or raise his own standing. And it's easy to see that those sorts of relationships will get us in trouble. But I suspect we all have relationships where it's not just that we want to be seen to be doing the right thing with that person, but with the other people looking in. And maybe when we feel the need to show that we have the right answer, it's not just that we know the answer to the maths problem. It's because we know Jesus and we really feel, but I'm a Christian and I know Jesus and I've read the Bible, so this is the right answer and this is the way we should do things. Listen to me, I've got it. And sometimes we're not even the leopard, we're the man, and we're trying to manipulate the situation from the outside. If you are using a goat to try and lure a leopard down from a tree, you probably need to apologize to the goat and the dog whose food you stole. The kingdom relationships, the best relationships, the ones that Jesus is inviting that seismic shift into, are born entirely from a place of love. They are not labeled with intention or usefulness. They are not constructed for personal gain. We're not all that bad. Lots of us are trying to help, I promise. And actually, that's how I felt when I read this. I know I really am trying to help. And there are lots of people who, yes, sometimes it does make me look a bit better when I help someone off the floor in the hospital. But actually, I am trying to help. And often we see need, and we see sadness, and we see desperation, and we see people living without the knowledge that we are blessed with in the saving power of Jesus Christ. And I don't know whether you sometimes really want to force it into them because life would just be so much better if they just knew the power of the gospel. And still, our pearls are trampled on. Still, we are met with anger. Again, Jesus asks us, what is your intention? Are you trying to make other people better? Are you trying to win people for Christ? Because the Great Commission at the end of Matthew tells us that. Are you driven by obligation or compassion? When we lay down our judgment by challenging, what was my first challenge? Wow, that's really not landed. I do have the slide. When we challenge our opinions, I was like, what is the word I used? When we challenge our opinions so that we see others the way that God sees them, when we challenge our vision so we are not blinded by our own sin, then we can challenge our intentions. How are we approaching these relationships? Because then God will reveal to us the help that is needed, not the help we think that they will need. Challenge your opinions, challenge your vision, challenge your intentions. We're about to finish, so if the band wouldn't mind coming up, there's one note I want to finish on. Because again, Jesus has prepared us for this bit of the passage. Right relationships with God go two ways, and he has invited us to play our part in them. But our right relationships with others go two ways as well. And in this room, we all have a responsibility to one another. But one of the hardest and most painful things is when we look back and realize we have challenged our opinions. We have made sure that we are not issuing that credo judgment over others. We are not wielding our power unnecessarily or abusing our position. And then we challenge our vision and we ask God to strip us away and help us to see the other clearly. And we challenge our intentions and make sure that the thing that is driving us is love, and we are still the person that is hurt. And Jesus knows that. And he's explained the way to approach that already in the sermon. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who are pure in heart. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. And actually, I think this isn't a pivot point in the sermon, like we are sometimes told in the Bible commentaries. This is just a reminder that everything comes back to our right relationship with God. As we are taught, when we are taught to pray by Jesus in the Sermon in the Mount, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father in heaven. Pray for your opinions and your vision and your intention, because your Father sees what is done in secret, and he will reward you. Amen.